Okay, and I'm missing a pen too. Okay. Good evening. So quiet. Usually there's chatter. Good evening. Welcome to the Village Board meeting of Monday, November 17th, 2025. We will be led this evening in the Pledge of Allegiance by our Village Clerk, Manal Desai. Please rise if you are able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call this meeting to order, and I ask that the Village Clerk, Manal Desai, please call the roll.
Trustee Pierce-Lovin?
Here.
Trustee Schechter?
Here.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Here.
Trustee Robinson?
Here.
Trustee Iverson?
Here.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Here.
Mayor Tennis?
Here, and we have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like anything removed? If not, I'd ask for
I was going to say, can you pull off number 4? Just the minutes, just to talk about it.
Okay, yes.
So we have to take the consent agenda off. You can't just pull things off the consent agenda.
Okay, so I need you to help me in the process. So, we are pulling the consent agenda, the entire consent agenda from consent, is what I'm being
My
told.
apologies, my apologies.
Okay.
Pull up, right, and then we'll just go back in order.
Okay, so we will approve everything but number 4,
Correct.
and then we will go back and we will talk about number
Yep.
4. Okay, so,
I thought he was talking about specific.
so is there a motion in order to approve everything but number 4 on the consent agenda? Trustee Robinson, thank you.
So
Is there a
moved.
second? Trustee Pierce-Lovin. Any comments or discussion? There being none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovin?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Thank you, and the consent agenda, absent item number 4, is approved. Now what I would ask for is a motion to approve number 4, and then we'll talk about it. So we'll get the motion on the table. Is there a motion to approve? Number 4, thank you. Trustee Pierce-Lovin, is there a second? Trustee Lissa Levy, thank you. Discussion.
No, I just appreciated the exercise. I thought it was a great opportunity for the board to have a discussion about the strategic plan. It was a long day, but I thought there was some really good discussion and a lot that we learned, not only from our discussion collaboratively as a unit, but I think we learned a little bit more about each other, which was nice.
Yes, it was. It was a good day. Thank you for staff, for their work. We did have good discussions, and I think, to me, the most important part, I certainly wholeheartedly agree with Trustee Robinson. We dug into some good conversations about village policy moving forward. We talked about our work together as a board. But what we spent a lot of time doing was talking through data that was compiled for us based on what the community told us during the 2.5 months of community comments around the village's first ever strategic plan. So we're grateful for the community to give us that input to discuss. The work on our strategic plan continues, and it will be finalized before the end of the year,
Be a draft by the end of the year and then finalized first quarter next.
first quarter of next year. So we're on our way, and it's a good process. And again, gratitude to my colleagues. Thank you, Trustee Robinson, for calling it out, and to the community. Any other comments? Trustee Lissa Levy.
I would like to echo the sentiments of Trustee Robinson. I thought it was a very valuable chance for us to work together as a board, get to know each other better as a board, and to create some board cohesion and some real bridges for working together in the future. And it fills me with a lot of optimism for what we can achieve in this term. So, yeah.
Again, well said. Anything else? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovin?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion is approved. The minutes of the board retreat, strategic planning, that was held on Sunday, November 2nd. Next item on the agenda is a presentation of the Public Health Partners. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm going to stop. As part of the consent agenda, the larger consent agenda, we approved a number of appointments to village boards and commissions. This will, this class, if you will, coming in today, this cohort, really brings us to almost 50 new commissioners appointed to various boards and commissions since April, since actually I think we started in August making those appointments. And that's something I think we can all be very proud of. And the trustees and I are all participating in that process. Once a month, we set aside time to interview individuals who have applied to serve. And the trustees, one at a time, because of Open Meetings Act, will join me in those interviews. And they're always good discussions. And we're not always able to make the appointments right away, but we make them when openings arise based on what those individuals, where their interests lie, and where we think that they may be best suited to serve the community. So what I'd like to do is ask the commissioners who were just appointed. Mr. Amundsen, are you here? If you'd stand. Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Domrick, I don't know if Tom's here, Mr. Habib, Mr. Lanero, Mr. Strauss, and Ms. Young. I know Ms. Young and Mr. Domrick said they might be here and they weren't sure. Thank you so much for your interest in being of service to our community. We know that you'll do a great job, and we look forward to seeing your recommendations and the evidence of your work in the future. Let's all give them a round of applause, please. Thank you. You may be seated. I'd also like to acknowledge another item that was on the consent agenda, and that is a resignation of a longtime friend and servant of the village, and I can barely see him in the back row there. Bob Quain, would you be kind enough to stand? So Bob has resigned as chair of the Beautification and Improvement Commission. Bob, we in this community owe you a debt of gratitude. For many years, Bob served with distinction on our Plan Commission. He took a brief hiatus and was called then back into service to chair the Beautification and Improvement Commission at a time when that commission was going through a transition. There had been a longtime chair who moved on to another area of service in the community, and there was need for a new chair to take the group into its next chapter. And Bob, you did that so well, and you brought the commission along with sustainability initiatives. You helped to retool the beautification awards that we had a couple meetings ago, where we recognized residents for their work to put pollinator gardens into their yards and other types of gardening that really enhance and uplift the village's sustainability plan. Bob doesn't stop there, though. Bob is a dedicated board member of the North Shore Center for the Performing Arts Foundation. He also serves as a board member for the Skokie Community Foundation. The list of Bob's community involvement goes on and on. Bob, thank you for your service. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of the Public Health Partners of Excellence Awards by Board of Health Chairperson Dr. Edward Lynn and Health and Human Services Director Mike Charlie. Dr. Lynn, thank you for your leadership, which I saw in action last Thursday evening, and please thank the Board of Health for their hard work. We look forward to the presentation.
Well, thank you, Mayor. This is one of the fun things I get to do. So good evening to you, to the trustees, the village manager Lockerbie, and members of the community. My name is Dr. Edward Lynn, and I serve as the chair of the Skokie Board of Health. Along with Mike Charlie, the director of our Health and Human Services Department, it's my honor to present the 15th Annual Public Health Partners in Excellence Award. Each year, the Skokie Health and Human Services Department and the Board of Health recognize organizations and/or individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the health and well-being of our community. These partnerships are essential. Our public health efforts depend on collaboration, innovation, and trust. Tonight, it is my privilege to honor those 4 exceptional partners whose work significantly strengthened the public health in Skokie over the past year. Now, the first 2 award recipients are the Howard Brown Health and the Chicago House and Social Services Agency. Health and Human Services partnership with these 2 amazing healthcare organizations brought bi-monthly walk-in, pop-up STI, sexually transmissible infection clinics to the Village Hall, removing barriers and opening doors for the community members who need accessible, confidential testing and support. Both organizations provide HIV and STI testing, prevention education, and linkage to care. They also partner with Skokie Health and Human Services to offer Mpox, COVID-19, and flu vaccinations, ensuring that our residents could access comprehensive sexual and public health services close to home. What made these partnerships truly remarkable was the commitment to eliminating barriers. No appointments were required, no identification was required, and no insurance was required. This approach ensured that even those without insurance could access the services that they required. Through this work, Chicago House and Howard Brown Health have advanced health equity, built trust, and ensured that prevention and care were available to all who need it. So I'd like to invite the Howard Brown Group to come forward to the podium to receive their award.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, can I get all of you guys?
One more. Thank you.
Now I want to invite Chicago House up to the podium to receive their award.
We have one more.
All right, now look at me, please.
The next recipient is the Early Childhood Alliance for Niles Township. Not yet. I want to brag a little bit about you, okay?
We want to hear it.
The Early Childhood Alliance's work serves both the educational and public health goals by strengthening stability, reducing stress on families, and helping children thrive in their earliest development. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, I did. The Childhood Alliance ensures that children from birth to age 5 have early learning experiences that build school readiness, provide support, social and emotional development, and reduce disparities that can impact families for years to come. The organization provides family liaisons for the community who speak Urdu, Dari, Farsi, Arabic, Assyrian, and Spanish, ensuring that families of all backgrounds can communicate comfortably and receive culturally responsive support. Their work connects families to healthcare, early learning programs, public benefits, and emergency assistance. They also provide interpretation, enrollment support, and parent facilitation services and empower families to navigate complex health systems. And as I said before, this works both from an educational and public health perspective, which improves the ability to strengthen stability, reduces stress on families, and helps children thrive in their earliest years of development. Now I want to invite you to come up to the podium.
That's great.
And our fourth award recognizes the Endeavor Health Infection Prevention Team. The team has been an essential partner in communicable disease investigation, ensuring rapid and coordinated and accurate responses to cases that affect our residents. They provide timely access to the EPIC electronic health record system, which allows us to get laboratory results reviewed quickly, and patients can be notified and connected to treatment without delay. Additionally, they coordinate urgent specimen transport to the Illinois Department of Public Health State Laboratory. They also support provider education and outreach and consistently demonstrate responsiveness, professionalism, and reliability. Their collaboration with Skokie Health and Human Services Department has strengthened patient advocacy, improved outbreak prevention efforts, and enhanced Skokie's overall public health response capacity. So I'd like to welcome representatives from Endeavor Health Infection Prevention Team to come to the podium for their award.
I also want to quickly introduce Amy McManus. Amy, if you can stand up, you can come up too, I guess. Amy is a big part of the Health and Human Services team. She's responsible for following up and responding to all our communicable diseases that we identify in Skokie. So she's a big part of the team.
Thank you so much.
So, on behalf of the Skokie Board of Health and the Health and Human Services Department, we want to extend our sincere appreciation to all of the individuals and organizations who were this year's recipients. Their leadership, dedication, and partnership have made a measurable difference in the health of our community. Again, we thank you for your continued commitment to the residents of Skokie. And again, I want to thank the mayor, the trustees, for the opportunity to present these awards.
Thank you, Dr. Lennon. Thank you again to the Board of Health. And I'd like to acknowledge, I just saw her, I think, there she is, Margaret Clausen, the superintendent of District 69. District 69's involvement, if I'm remembering correctly, Margaret, really gave wings to the Early Childhood Alliance. And the Skokie Community Foundation, I know, provided some seed funding. So it definitely takes a village. And I know it took a minute to get some of those pictures organized, but boy, the camaraderie, and there were some hugs in that last one. That's what community partnerships are all about. So thank you. Let's take about a 2-3 minute recess. Just if there are those of you who were here only for that presentation, you're welcome to go. So we will reconvene at 7 minutes to 8. Public comment. This public comment and the time that we will set aside at the end of the meeting are for addressing the board in regard to items that are not part of tonight's agenda. Each person, each speaker is allotted 3 minutes. Please note that this is an opportunity to address the board, and we will listen, but we will not be responding. This is our time to listen to you. Please note, speakers who choose to come to the podium and address the board during this public comment period time will, they will not be able to address the board at the second public comment time. It's one or the other. So, who would like to address the board first? Ms. Grodnicki, you seem to be first in line. And I should also mention, all speakers are timed to a precise 3 minutes.
Last time I started talking about greenhouse gases other than CO2, and that you can have a kind of equivalence factor between those and CO2, just so that we know how potent they can be. And I mentioned, I think this is the right one, that there are 6 main greenhouse gases that the EPA looks at. It's CO2 and methane, N2O, HFCs, which are refrigerants, PFCs, SF6, and NF3. So these are all man-made. Most CO2, so CO2 has a natural cycle, as I mentioned before, but we're adding to it. And methane also has a natural methane cycle, right? There are ruminants, animals that chew their cud, they burp out methane. Actually, my daughter was going to come up here and address you about cows. And but anyway, so they do burp out methane, but there's a natural methane cycle. Just when we have a lot of cows, they are extra cows, and the methane cycle can't handle all of it. But also decomposition, right? When you send food to landfill, we get methane. This is why it's so important not to do that, to send it to the compost. These are from agriculture, and I mentioned refrigerants, and then insulating foam. So this is going to be hard to eliminate given our current society. So you can see some of the other things that cause these to be produced. And I mentioned that there's a way to compare them to how powerful they are for CO2. So this is molecule for molecule over 100 years. And it's really important. And this is from the IPCC's 6th report. It's really important to mention the time frame that you're doing this over, because if you have one molecule and you watch how much energy it takes up, it varies a lot. But so methane doesn't stay in the air for 100 years. If you only looked at how much energy it does, like every time it absorbs some infrared light, it's actually 80, which is why sometimes you'll see a huge range. Non-fossil fuel methane actually has a lower global warming potential than fossil fuel methane, and this is because part of the natural methane cycle is to turn back into CO2 eventually. So the fossil methane is extra CO2 that's being put into the air. And then here you see it's getting higher and higher and higher. This depending on what kind it is, because these chemicals, there are so many different kinds of these chemicals, so there's a huge range. So for example, one molecule of SF6 will cause over 24,000 times more warming over 100 years as one molecule. Oh, time flies, you know.
Thank you, Ms. Grodnicki. We always appreciate the learning opportunities you present us with. Thank you. Mr. Shah.
Good evening. My family lived safely at 8104 Lincoln Avenue for years until the village facilitated an unreviewed, unpermitted project that removed our only lawful access to Lincoln Avenue, a state route without IDOT approval or required inspections, permits, and proper board review. This created an illegal obstruction and clear violations of NFPA standards, IDOT rules, village codes, state and federal laws being violated. Yet the village manager declares the matter is closed, despite the violations being obvious and fully documented. Village manager, Mr. John Lockerbie, and village council, Ms. Mangler, have denied hazards, refused needed correction, withheld subpoenaed records, and rejected reasonable efforts at resolution. Documents also show expedited and skipped approvals and special accommodations for the developer and his attorneys, while residents like us are ignored and left unsafe in unlawful conditions. This reflects a focus on liability avoidance, not public safety. When key administrators withhold information, avoid accountability, and deny residents basic rights, safety, access protections, the board has a legal duty to intervene. Under Illinois municipal law, the trustees, not the village manager, hold the governing authority and must override unsafe, unreasonable decisions that expose residents and the village to liability. Skokie is not a dictatorship, and it cannot be governed by one man. If senior officials, including the mayor, the manager, the council, know that these hazards exist yet refuse to act, it raises serious questions about whether they are fulfilling their duties to the people of Skokie. Leadership requires corrective action, not denial. And if unsafe and unlawful conditions are knowingly allowed to persist, the board must evaluate whether these officials should remain in position and public trust. My family did not create these issues and violations. We should not be facing retaliation, blocked access, loss of services, intimidation, threats, and unsafe conditions for reporting hazards the village is legally required to address. I urge the trustees to use your authority to correct these violations, restore our safe access, and ensure transparency and accountability in village leadership. This is both a legal obligation and a moral duty owed to every resident of Skokie. Skokie deserves better. Its residents deserve better. I hope tonight marks a beginning of the course correction this community urgently needs. Senior officials' conduct shows a level of indifference to resident safety that no community should tolerate. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. Mr. Dalka.
Give me a second here. Hi, David Dalka, representing 93. Oh, can we start the clock properly?
Go ahead, Nick, go ahead and just restart the clock for the gentleman.
So I was going to take a minute to get ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. David Dalka, 9330 Laurel. I'm here to invite Fire Commissioner Eichner to a meeting on 2 p.m. on November 24th with Trustee Robinson. I will be meeting with Trustee Robinson. I'd invite you to come. You can coordinate that through Trustee Robinson. My father deserves to go to a hospital with the right treatment, and you have a moral, much like the last speaker, you have a duty to make sure that that happens. I also seek a meeting with you and the head of EMS Region 10 and EMS Region 9 to once and for all do the right thing. I thank you for your help with that, and I hope that you can have a good Thanksgiving once you do the right thing. I'd also like to ask the trustees to ask the village manager to complete all items on my June 3rd letter no later than Thanksgiving. All items need to be completed. 6 months is more than enough time to complete a simple list of administrative tasks that department heads need to complete to make the northwest portion of Skokie livable. In addition, Trustee Iverson and I have talked, and I would like to, at a future meeting, create a large panel on the need to have, why it's important to have fiber internet at every household in Skokie, not just certain households. I'd like to ask that the board ask the village manager to first create a list of all the regions and addresses that have fiber internet and the ones that don't, and present that map at the next meeting so we can have a conversation about that. There's medical necessities. There's people that want to work from home. There's people that can't be here right now because they need to go to other places. Last week, Saturday, I attended at the University of Chicago a fascinating event called City Civics. And one of the sessions that I attended was a session called Trees as Community Infrastructure. As you know, the infrastructure of Skokie has been grossly mismanaged for the past decade. I learned several things at this wonderful meeting. Number one is I've been told that the tree stumps on our parkway can't be ground up because the village can't afford to do that. That's actually completely incorrect and fully negligent. The Morton Arboretum up north at the end of the expressway by Lake Kirk Road has information about how to get to federal programs that create stipends and grants. I'm sure the overpromoted grant writer will love those programs to get that there. So I'd like the Dalkas family house at 9330 Laurel to be the first house that gets 2 tree stumps removed via this program. In addition, The highway on the 9300 block of Long needs trees on both the IDOT side and the side of the Skokie, that all the other blocks.
Thank you, Mr. Dalka. I'm sorry, your time is, Mr. Dalka, your time is finished. Thank you. Mr. Dalka, your time is finished. All speakers are given a precise 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you for your comments.
It's past my bedtime, so bear with me. Good evening. My name is Edie, and I'm here tonight because of what happened on October 7th in Skokie. It was not simply an incident. It was an attack on Jewish children in a public park. It was an attack on their sense of safety, on their parents' trust, and on the foundation of what community is supposed to protect. The ADL's National Report on Anti-Semitism this year makes something very clear. When Jewish Americans experience anti-Semitism directly, or even witness it happening to someone else, the psychological impact is deep. Rates of anxiety and depression rise sharply. The numbers are higher for witnessed harm, and they are the highest for direct harm. These are not distant statistics. These are our children. These are families who live here, play here, and believed Skokie was a place where they would be safe. Their fear is not theoretical. It is lived, it is daily, and it is still happening. But there's another part of the data that matters to this conversation. It shows something called post-traumatic growth. That is the process where people emerge from their trauma with a stronger sense of purpose, resilience, and connection to their community, a deeper appreciation for life, a stronger belief in their own strength, a renewed sense of commitment to faith and identity. And the most remarkable part of this is that the people who experienced the most severe anti-Semitism were the most likely to report the highest kind of this growth. But growth does not happen automatically. It happens when communities show up. It happens when leadership does not minimize fear, but responds to it with clarity and urgency. It happens when institutions acknowledge trauma instead of explaining it away. It happens when a village chooses to stand with its residents rather than distance itself from their experiences. So my question tonight is simple. How is Skokie helping its Jewish residents move from fear to strength? How is the village supporting the children who were attacked? How is it supporting their parents who still carry the shock and the anger of that day? How is it supporting the broader Jewish community, which still feels unsettled in the parks and the sidewalks they're supposed to belong to all of us? And how is it supporting the entire village? Because an attack on any child in Skokie is an attack on the moral fabric of this community. Healing from hate crimes is not about forgiving or forgetting. It doesn't require forgiveness. It begins with safety. It begins with feeling seen. It begins with the village standing up and saying clearly that what happened is unacceptable and every resource will be used to ensure it never happens again. We cannot undo what happened, but we can decide what happens next. We can decide whether this moment divides us or strengthens us. We can decide whether fear is allowed to linger or whether leadership steps forward and says that Jewish children in Skokie will be protected without hesitation and without exception. I believe this community can grow from this painful moment. I believe it can emerge stronger. But that growth depends on action, it depends on transparency, it depends on a village that does not wait for the next incident, but takes responsibility now. The children who were attacked deserve nothing less.
I'm sorry, your time is up. You're welcome to submit your comments in writing, and if you'd be kind enough to give your contact information, if you care to our Deputy Village Clerk Sylvia Luke, I would like very much to get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss.
Good evening. I'm sorry that I'm an unscheduled speaker, but what prompted me to come today is something that just happened today. And I came home from work and found at 7:15 p.m. and found that my house had suffered some vandalization. All my Stand for Israel signs had been ripped down. The holders had been bent. My Israeli flag it appeared that they had tried to rip it down but couldn't get it down, so it was like twisted around the pole. I looked at my Ring camera and saw that at 4:30, when the kids would be walking home from school, the flag was unfurled and it was waving. But it was definitely, I couldn't tell in the dark as well, but it looked like it was totally wrapped around and looked like it was somewhat ripped. I'd like to say this was the first time. This is the fourth time this has happened to us. And we shouldn't feel that we have to put up with this. We don't do anything. It's just a sign that says, I stand with Israel. That's all it says. It doesn't ask anyone to do anything. It doesn't put down anyone else. It just says, I stand with Israel. And I've lived here 38 years, and I've raised my entire family here. And to see this in the last few years, when I never saw it for the first 35 that I lived here, it's very shocking. It's very shocking. So I ask that we not think that this is something that happened once and it's done and we'll sweep it and it'll go away, because it's still happening, and it's happened to me 4 times. Because every time they kick down a sign, I put up an extra one. So I know how many times it's happened. Now my problem is I can't get an extra sign because they don't make them anymore. So I lost one entirely today. I only have 3 left. But it's something that we should care, and we should care that people don't feel safe. And I came home to an empty house, and it didn't feel exactly safe walking up that driveway at night after I noticed what had happened. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Our police chief, Jesse Barnes, is in the back. Ma'am, if you'd be, Chief Barnes will meet you in the back. I'm sure he'd like to talk to you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Okay, if not, we will close this public comment session, and the next item on the agenda is a presentation of the investigation report for the February 2025 Skokie water loss event. Giving us the presentation is Dr. Sean D., Principal Engineer of Exponent. Dr. D.
Thank you. Today I'm going to be sharing the details of Exponent's investigation into the water loss event that happened in February earlier this year. What I'll cover today in the presentation, I'm going to introduce the investigation team at Exponent who has worked on this project. We'll do a brief overview of the incident that occurred in February. Then I'm going to walk through a description of the component that failed and how the individual pieces kind of manifest together. We'll look at a comparison of the subject component that failed as well as 2 exemplar components that were excavated as part of the investigation. And then we'll share the conclusions at this stage of the investigation. As I was introduced, my name is Sean D. I am a PhD chemical engineer. I work for a company called Exponent. We are a forensic engineering consulting firm. We're an international firm, and we have offices here in Chicago, as well as I work in our Warrenville office. One of my colleagues was going to be here today, but is stuck testifying at a trial out of state. That's Dr. Joe Tucker. Dr. Tucker is a metallurgist who specializes in analyzing and understanding how metal components fail in a variety of systems. And then we also have 2 wonderful associates, Dr. Isaac Mostowski, as well as Dr. Rizzardi, who are the other 2 members of the team and did a lot of the heavy lifting on the investigation. We coordinated with various departments within the village, most specifically Public Works, Corporation Council, as well as the village manager. So a little bit of background on February 14th earlier this year at approximately 5:15 a.m. A water leak was reported near the intersection of East Prairie Road and Emerson Street in Skokie, Illinois. It's circled here in the red on the top right photograph. The leak source was identified as a 36-inch diameter Y assembly, which was missing its end cap. So if we look here in the bottom photo, pull my laser pointer out. This assembly is typically capped here at this particular interface, and so that cap had separated from the assembly, and so this buried line was essentially releasing water through this 36-inch diameter opening. This assembly was excavated and replaced with a elbow connector. So what is a Y assembly? A Y assembly is a piping junction that either combines two flow streams into one or diverts one flow stream into two. The Y assemblies we're going to talk about today are all capped in one location. So you'll hear me talk about a couple of specific components. There's the junction. This is kind of the cast Y piece that sits in the front of the assembly. We have piping that enters two of the three entry points within the Y junction. And then there's a cap that's installed and sealed with a lead and oakum seal. So oakum is a fibrous material, typically hemp. And what they would do when they would seal these assemblies is they would push this fibrous material in between the joint where the end cap would go, and then molten lead would be poured in. It was a common sealing technique in the 1950s when these components were installed. This particular junction is then buried, and then the end cap is reinforced or provided structure through buried components, which can be timber or cement block, which is referred to as thrust blocking. So when you hear me talk about the term Y assembly, I'm talking about the junction, the piping that comes into the junction, the end cap, the seal that composes the seal around the end cap, as well as the thrust blocking. The other thing that's interesting about this particular part of the water transmission system is it connects a capital project from 1954 when the 30-inch diameter main for Skokie was installed along Church Street. So we have documentation from that project which shows the installation of this water main terminating at the corner of Church and East Prairie. And you can see here it says that a future feeder from Evanston will be connected into this system. A corresponding set of project documentation exists for a 1956 installation project in the city of Evanston. This is a water main that extends down Emerson Street to the corner of McCormick Road, and it ends, and there is a note that a plug with temporary blocking will be provided. And so we have a 1954 project and a 1956 project with documentation that ends at these two respective locations. There is an interconnection line that connects the 54 water main with the 56 water main project, and the leak that occurs at a Y junction that sits on this particular water main. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of construction documentation associated with this interconnection line. And so because of that, part of the investigation was to look at this particular interconnection line, identify any potential similar components of similar construction, and excavate them and remove them from service with new replacements. So talking specifically about the Y assembly that was the subject of the water release. So again, if you were to look at this Y assembly, the direction of water flow comes from the background of this picture and then makes a turn and comes out the foreground. And then this is where that cap would be. So this open hole right here would coincide with this dead end here on the atlas map. A couple things to note about this assembly. Water flow moves kind of right to left in the field and then down. So you're going to see direct impingement of water flow on this end cap assembly, which is something to note when we talk about the three assemblies that were excavated. When we actually do a detailed review of this assembly, we can find markings on the piping that comes into the Y junction. Those markings read ASIPCO, which is an abbreviation for the American Cast Iron Pipe Company. It bears a mark on it that says 1956. which is consistent with the documentation associated with the Evanston construction project. There were remnants of the lead oakum seal which were recovered. They were tested with X-ray fluorescence to confirm the presence of lead. So that confirms that that is the mechanism that's used to kind of provide the seal. And we can also detect presence of lead within the sealing surface. So it does look like, even though there's no seal that's still kind of within the Y junction, that all of the evidence suggests that this was an end cap that was sealed with a lead oakum seal. In the excavation site at the subject Y assembly, one piece of timber was recovered, which is suspected to be part of the original thrust blocking. Despite repeated efforts, both with looking at sifting through excavation debris with a mechanical backhoe, using ground penetrating radar, as well as metal detectors, the end cap associated with this assembly was not recovered as part of the investigation. And the other thing is the extent of the release also gives us an unknown related to the field condition of thrust blocking in the buried assembly about how that particular end cap was reinforced.
Question. Where the heck did it go? I mean, if you just use your professional opinion, did it deteriorate? What are your thoughts about?
Yeah. That's a great question, and one the investigation team has asked a lot of questions about. Obviously, there was a large amount of displacement associated with the release of water in this particular incident. I do not think this end cap disintegrated, broke apart, or anything like that. It's likely it was displaced with the flow of water from this assembly, and was just not within the area that was excavated or the debris and spoilings that were recovered from the excavation site.
So this thing's about 36 inches.
Yeah,
Pretty big.
yeah, 3 feet.
How thick?
Thick, we're talking on the order of, 1.5 to 2 inches in thickness.
It's like a manhole top.
It's a heavy piece of metal.
We'll take one more question from trustee Pierce-Lovan, and then we're going to let Dr. D finish, and we'll hold the other questions till the end. But
Thank
go
you.
ahead, trustee
Thank you, real
Pierce-Lovan.
quick. What is the significance of the 1-inch piece of timber?
So we'll see when we go through the excavation of the other two assemblies, we see differences in the amount of timber that's used to restrain the end cap. And we'll see one of the end caps without a lot of restraint looks like it was also progressing towards an eventual failure as well. But that's where we're heading to. So looking at the other Y assemblies, there are 2 additional Y assemblies within this transmission line. One sits just due east of the subject assembly. That assembly is one that we're calling Sculpture Park because it sits within a park area adjacent to McCormick Boulevard. The other is down at the corner of Church and Prairie Road, and that's the one that's highlighted down here. So you can see again, here the Atlas map has this kind of Y assembly junction. This looks more like a cross, but these are rather crude Atlas drawings that are just part of the historic record. And then down here at Church and Prairie Street, you can see another Y assembly component. So given the gaps associated with the subject component, these 2 components were excavated and replaced, and then they were evaluated as part of the investigation. So let's start by looking at what the condition of field thrust blocking looks like. So here is the direction of water flow is coming down this way through this assembly, and then taking the turn and running this way. So this end cap does not sit directly in the direction of water flow. You can see here in the excavation timber, this timber is bidirectional, meaning that we have both vertical and horizontal members. There are 6 pieces of timber that form the restraint thrust blocking on the Church Street and East Prairie Road Y assembly. And then there are additional wooden wedges that are put in place to further hold and restrain this particular end cap assembly in place. We'll go through kind of a detailed structure of what the markings are and what the condition is of this assembly after it was cleaned in a subsequent slide. If we look at the assembly that's up near Sculpture Park, so this is the one that's just due east of the assembly that was the source of the leak. Here we have water flow which flows this way from the top and then takes a turn and goes this way down the water main. So again, we have direct impingement on the end cap. Here there are only two pieces of timber for thrust blocking. So you can see one of them here, they're unidirectional as well. They're both oriented horizontally here. So both these components were excavated. Here's a picture of the Sculpture Park assembly as it was being taken out, and then it was replaced with an elbow connector where you have one complete cast component as opposed to this fixture with a joint in it as part of the distribution system. So let's start by looking at the Church and Prairie Street assembly.
Just to clarify, it is East Prairie.
East
That's the
Prairie.
actual name of the street, is East Prairie.
Yes.
Just in case people are wondering who are watching.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Church Street and East Prairie Road. So again, this is the assembly as it was removed and then made available for inspection. This again is how it's oriented on the map. Again, as we said in the prior slide, water flows from the left here, comes down and then turns and heads to the background. So this particular end cap is not in the direction of water flow. This assembly also has markings on the piping which read SIPCO 1954 as opposed to 1956, which was on the subject assembly. The seal type, the end cap and seal are still contained within the assembly. X-ray fluorescence indicates that this seal surface shows high amounts of lead consistent with a lead and oakum seal. The end cap and seal are well seated within the assembly. So the junction, the Y junction's flange aligns very well with the lead seal, and then the end cap protrudes outward. So you can see this is a rather flush connection that we have between the seal and the junction on the flange. No discernible markings on the end cap to identify either a fabrication date or potential source of manufacture. So now let's look instead at the Sculpture Park Y assembly, which is the one that is due east of the subject assembly. Again, we have this kind of cross connection indication on the atlas map, but this cross connection, this is actually a Y assembly. Water here flows from this direction. It directly impinges on this end cap, and then there is a turn in the Y, which then takes it to the west. Markings on the Sculpture Park Y assembly also read a SIPCO 1956, which is the same fabrication vintage as the Evanston project as well as the subject assembly. The end cap is noted also as reading a SIPCO 1956. It also says nodular, which is a synonym for ductile iron. We also confirmed what the materials of construction of both the junction and these components were, and cast and nodular iron are consistent with those compositions. The seal type is also capable of being read through X-ray fluorescence. We see, again, high indications of lead consistent with a lead oakum seal. This end cap is pushed about an inch outward from the assembly. And so you can see this through these arrows, this gap of kind of outward displacement of this end cap on the Sculpture Park Y assembly. Again, looking at a similar comparison, you can see we have this displacement from the Y junction's flange outward, where it looks like this end cap has moved, and we see a corresponding gap on the internal surface. So this is, I've climbed into the pipe to look at the water side, and we have this gap that's opened up of similar thickness, where we see separation as well as corrosion and internal deposits, indicating to the investigation team that this is a gradual displacement as opposed to a prompt displacement through some event that happened directly preceding the incident. So, looking at a comparison of these three assemblies, there are a lot of similarities between the subject assembly that was the source of the water leak as well as the Sculpture Park assembly. Both of those end caps are in the direct impingement of water flow. On the subject assembly, the end cap was missing, but there are also indications on the seal that was recovered which indicate there may have been displacement or movement on that seal that preceded the liberation of the end cap. On the Sculpture Park assembly, we see this gradual displacement and pushing outward. It's the investigation's thought that that assembly was probably progressing towards a similar failure at some point in the future. We see limited timber recovered from the subject assembly, as well as limited timber and thrust blocking in the Sculpture Park assembly, particularly compared with the thrust blocking that was installed at the Church Street and East Prairie Road assembly. And then we also see similar fabrication marking dates on the subject and Sculpture Park, whereas the Church Street and East Prairie Road assembly was had a stamp indicating 1954. So in the investigation's view, the most likely potential cause or primary cause of the liberation or separation of this end cap was the gradual deterioration of this Y assembly, driven primarily by inadequate thrust blocking in the buried installed condition on the assembly. This is legal mumbo jumbo, just to cover us, but at this point, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Trustee Schechter.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. So when, so you talked about gradual versus prompt displacement, and we know reading your report, it just said at 5:15 a.m., that was when this was discovered. How long, like what is, are you able to guesstimate a timeline for this whole?
So one of the sources of data the investigation reviewed as part of the materials we were provided, we looked at both flow and pressure data in the water system for about a 5-day duration leading up into the incident to see if there was a high pressure transient, which would have been indication of like water hammer, essentially blowing this particular assembly out. We did not see any evidence within that data set of a high pressure transient in the system. Given the fact that you see corrosion kind of in that gap in the both the Sculpture Park assembly as well as the subject assembly, if I had some more photos, I could show you. Progress upwards. You can kind of see here where the corrosive deposits are also feeding their way into this surface where the seal would have sat. That again, corrosion is not necessarily a prompt failure or kind of mechanism. It takes time. And so if there are clean surfaces, that would give us some indication that maybe something prompt had happened. Looking at, over the course, when we say gradual, do we mean from the day it was installed in 1956 or some other point past that point in time? I don't think the investigation can really get to a higher resolution than that, other than to say this is not a prompt failure that was caused by something immediately preceding the incident.
Can I just quick
Follow up, and then we'll go
Yeah.
to Trustee Lissa Levy.
Just that I know, and maybe this is something for Max, but that there had been some investigation that the village did because there was like a small leak of some kind. Just wondered what that, how that connected or didn't connect with what this was.
Yeah, and Max can probably speak to that in more detail.
So this is Max Slankert, our Public Works Director. And Max, when we're through with questions, Max is going to talk to us about other items involved and next lessons learned and next steps.
So good evening, and thanks for the question. So Yeah, so on the day before, February 13th, the origin of activity out there was that we had a call from a passing motorist about water on the roadway at Emerson and East Prairie, very near TJ Maxx. And so we began the investigation the afternoon of the 13th. Right? The call came in shortly after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe. And so we mobilized to the scene about 3 o'clock, did Julie locates, and went to the scene looking for a leak on the 8-inch line. There's an 8-inch water line that goes north to south, although it's technically northeast to southwest, on East Prairie on that southbound lane. And there's a valve vault there at that intersection, and that's where water was surfacing in that valve vault. And so water sewer deployed out there looking for a leak, advanced 2 excavations that evening into the night. We notified residents in the area to do a water shutdown, initially I think at 5:30 p.m., but then that was pushed back to 6 p.m. because we had to expand the area of the water shutdown. So we were doing excavation and exploration activities out there until almost 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock that morning. We dug 2 excavations, one on each side of the valve vault on the 8-inch line, couldn't find the source of the leak. And so at that point, our crew was beyond 18 hours, approaching 19 hours in the field. And we try and break our crews at 16 hours if we can for safety purposes. And so at that point in time, we made the decision that we needed to break off. The crews needed to be released. We would come back in the morning with the benefit of sunlight conditions and continue our examination of the leak. So, you know, there was a water leak. We were under the presumption that we were looking for a leak on that 8-inch main. It was sort of consistent with the volume of water that we were seeing. The operators who were digging that scene that night reported that they were getting water in the excavation, but when you're looking for a water leak in the wintertime, getting water in the sidewalls of the excavation is not unusual, but the quantity of water that they were getting into the sidewalls of the excavation was not, you know, a particularly large or noteworthy amount such that they would think that had anything to do with the transmission mains that were in the area. And I say mains because it's worth noting that we have not one but 2 36-inch transmission mains in that intersection. So that's what was going on in the lead up. So then, unfortunately, of course, this main blew out at around 5 a.m.
Thank you. Trustee Lissa Levy. Max, thank you.
So I have a couple of, a compound question. So my first question is, what is the likelihood of failure in other parts of the system? And can those potential failures be identified through infrared technology or X-ray technology or some less invasive technology than excavation? That's the first part of my compound question.
Yeah. So when you think about trying to manage the risk associated with buried water infrastructure, looking at diameter and pressure are usually 2 indicators. Larger diameter or higher pressure systems are going to translate to more water that will come out if you have a component that fails. So as it relates to these particular systems, in my discussions with Public Works, there is a capital improvement plan that's being developed associated with a 5 to 7 year managing of this infrastructure. There's also a call for a request for quotes associated with doing an assessment on 20-inch diameter and larger transmission lines. The science and available techniques to actually do non-destructive condition assessment is relatively limited, just because of the challenges associated with assessing conditions of components like this buried. What you'll typically find is more of those non-destructive techniques will give you a sense of potentially evaluating loss of wall thickness along the length of the pipe, as opposed to the strength or condition of junctions or joints that may be within the system.
Okay. So my next little question is it possible that nearby activity, vibration, et cetera, can hasten the failure of an end cap, given that we've seen you're identifying deterioration of the thrust blocking?
I think it's unlikely, just because, again, when we look at the condition on the interior surfaces, if this were something where there was some sort of nearby activity that had caused that liberation, I would have anticipated we would have seen kind of much cleaner surfaces on the corresponding mating surface of the Y junction, as opposed to this kind of gradual deterioration, as well as if that was the case where there was activity in the area, we would still have a lot of questions related to why do we see this displacement in Sculpture Park? What kind of activity could be in that area that would directly affect these two assemblies, which, there's a lot of earth in between them that would impact that. But when you have similar kind of construction, similar amounts of thrust blocking, that's usually indicative to the investigation that there may be a similar mechanism going on between the assembly that failed and the one where we're seeing displacement in the recovered excavated assembly.
Thank you. And can you please speak to why an elbow joint is now considered best practice to replace a Y junction?
Yeah, anytime you have components in a pressurized system, you have to ask where your weak points are. And if you have a completely cast component, then you don't have these combination of materials that can be kind of a point of weakness, and there's no ability for a seal to fail. Or if you're going to see failure of that component, it's typically related to the strength of the cast material that's made. And so those are more robust in comparison to having these assemblies where we have to have joints that are installed and fabricated within the field in order to provide that seal as well as that restraint and closure of the system to keep the system contained.
Thank you.
Yes, Trustee Robinson.
Thanks again for a super thorough report. Quick question. In looking at the assemblies that you identified, there seem to be only 3 of the Y assemblies.
Correct.
Did we look at a more comprehensive mapping of the village to see if there are other vulnerable areas that could also have the Y assemblies?
So the evaluation for this piece focused on the interconnection line that came down to the corner of Church Street and East Prairie, because this is the line where there was some uncertainty associated with details associated when the vintage was of when those components were put in, the fabrication date of those components, as well as the condition of the assemblies. Given the fact that we excavated the 1954 assembly at the corner of Church and East Prairie, and it looked very, very good in condition, I think that speaks to potentially a more thorough thrust blocking that was installed at original installation. I know Public Works has also done a review to make sure that to the extent they can, they've identified these types of components, particularly on the large diameter water transmission lines. And to the best of our knowledge, definitely within this interconnection network, these are all the assemblies that we have indications of being in this interconnection line. And I don't believe I've seen stuff further down the 30-inch main, but Public Works has really tried to focus on identifying any sort of these vulnerabilities and developing a plan to replace them.
Trustee Iverson.
Dr. D, thank you very much. My first question is actually for our manager. The report, it just does, I think, a fantastic job. It makes it real clear for me. And is that report available to anybody, to the public?
Yes, the report is online currently in the board packet.
and so it's available to anyone on the website.
Yeah, excellent. The report is really good. And there was just one thing that you mentioned, because your description of the Ys and their configurations and how that can, cause the gradual weakening of the joint. You mentioned to Trustee Levy that in the run between those Ys, you're not particularly concerned about joints failing as much as you are concerned about the walls being thinned. My initial thought in reading the report is that I would worry about any joints in between the Ys, in that it was specifically the pressure in the Y that caused that cap to fail so fantastically that it's blown up under the road somewhere.
Agree that looking for vulnerabilities and weak points within the system, focusing on junctions where you're taking cast components and either providing a sealing surface or joining components together, those tend to be the areas of focus when you try to evaluate where your vulnerabilities are. I think the comment I made previously was when we look at the options for non-destructive examination techniques, there aren't a lot of surface level non-destructive examination techniques that can be dispatched in order to tell you what the condition of those components are. There isn't necessarily a technique that could have been employed that would have shown that displacement of that end cap from the Sculpture Park assembly. You had to dig it up and take a chisel and a pickaxe to it to, clear off debris to reveal the underlying surface. And that's because one of the primary failure mechanisms that you see in buried infrastructure, whether it's water or gas, is the gradual corrosion and deterioration of pipe wall thickness, which then creates a crack in the pipe, and then you see a leak through the pipe wall. I think it's important to note that that's not what we saw here. This wasn't a crack in a pipe wall. This was a sealing junction surface that then failed and created essentially an open 36-inch full-bore main in the water system.
Are there other questions for Dr. D? And then we'll call up Max. Trustee Schechter.
Yeah, just my question relates to, again, back to that timeline. So I know it was not immediately discovered that it was, in fact, this 36-inch water main, that there was a period of time where, and I don't even think we knew where it, like literally where we were. I just want to get a sense of what it takes when something like this happens, how to figure out the source, and like you say, you may not necessarily notice it if you have a whole street that's being flooded.
Yeah. And one of the sections of the report, we do talk about identifying isolation points so that you can efficiently respond to an incident like this and isolate the source of water. As it relates to what we know about timeline, just to further support kind of the conversation Max had, when we do look at flow data, we see a large dramatic step change in flow data right around this 5 a.m. Time period. So it does look like while during the initial leak response there may be indications of water seeping into the system, that was not indicative of the full end cap had liberated while there was this response to the 8-inch water line. I think this liberation of the end cap happened, again, close to this 5 a.m. time point on February 14th.
Trustee Iverson, and then we'll ask Public Works Director Slankard to come forward. Mr. Dalka, it seems that you're anxious to speak. This is not an action item, so we won't be taking comments from the public.
About lead pipes.
Thank you.
You've been mailing out stuff to replace.
Mr. Dalka, this is not, Mr. Dalka, this is not the time for public comment. We will not be having public comment from the village board. Thank you. Trustee Iverson.
No, Again, I think the report is really thorough, and of course, I know that there's going to be other trouble points that, that I know Public Works is already aware of and looking into, so no, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. D. Stay close in case we have other questions.
Okay.
Public Works Director Max Slinkard, again.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to discuss briefly, the memorandum that was included in the packet with respect to next steps, and then some of the after-action items, if you will. So, as Sean alluded to, we talked in the immediate aftermath of the water main break about next steps on our February 18th, 2025 presentation, and we've completed the majority of those steps. I would say that, probably from an important big picture standpoint, one of the things was determine mitigation measures necessary to prevent this from occurring in the future. And based upon what we thought we have understood about the nature of this failure, we've taken care of the two biggest points of vulnerability through this investigation process by removal of these two other Y joints and replacement with the elbows and with more robust, modern thrust restraint systems. And I'll talk about the last item on that next steps list, which was the post-incident analysis. As Sean alluded to in his report, the big next step for us, as we just alluded to, is, putting out an RFQ, which we will put out within the next week or 10 days, an RFQ for services to do an assessment of the transmission main infrastructure. The question was asked about technology, I think, from Trustee Levy. We don't know for sure what that technology will be, and that's why we want to approach it as an RFQ, so that we go to the marketplace and ask the experts to come back to us with an understanding of what the characteristics are of our system, our pipe sizes, our flow rates, our pressures, and have them tell us what's the best assessment technology that's out there for us. We have some ideas, but we're not going to profess to be the experts on what that solution would look like. So as Sean said, the likelihood is that a lot of that analysis is going to focus on pipe thickness and deterioration or change in pipe thickness and a rating of pipe thickness. But we do have other questions that we want to explore. As Trustee Robinson was asking, are there other Y joints in the system? No, not that we see in our atlas. But there are other places in our system, smaller pipe sizes, where we do have some, I'll call them butt joints, if you will. And so there are other issues in the system where we want the opportunity to work with whatever it is expert that we retain to talk about some of these issues and get some more inputs as to how to better assess what those vulnerabilities are. And there are a couple other places in the routing of our transmission main system where we go, for example, under other significant infrastructure. We have a crossing under the Edens Expressway. We have a crossing under Skokie Boulevard. That, those locations bear some more scrutiny because obviously a failure in those areas has significant consequences. In terms of the post-incident analysis, as a emergency operations team, and let me just very briefly explain what that is. So the Skokie has, I think, a pretty good system for how we operate our emergency operations center. Every community probably has an emergency operations center. Skokie's, I think, is somewhat sophisticated. I've worked in 3 or 4 communities now, so I think I can say that. Skokie uses our EOC process frequently, as those who are on the staff or elected officials who've been around for a little while know. We frequently use an EOC process with snow and ice control, so we exercise it with some frequency. The benefit of that is we get some level of familiarity with operating in that setting. So we got together and reviewed this operation in terms of an EOC sort of setting and tried to analyze how the response to this event went and sort of did a self-critique on lessons learned. So to work through those real quickly, In terms of the emergency operations itself, we operated in the past with 3 principal tierings of like levels of incidents, and each level of incident is sort of a severity rating, and that dictates the staff call-outs, if you will. Well, we've doubled the number of those tierings now in response to this, and the real benefit of that is just the identification of the responders that need to be involved and how quickly we can get messaging sent out to each of those tierings, just to make us that much more nimble. I would say that the biggest lessons and the most reflection went into what I would call communication lessons. And the first of those, is about timely coordination and communication of messaging to the community, and how to think about what I would consider to be some of our prepackaged messages and who those groupings of people are or institutions in the community. And in this particular incident, I'm thinking in particular of the school districts, of how to get that information out quickly. In the case of the school districts, I think we did actually a fairly good job of getting that message out, and we were able to validate that our communications went out. The challenge, I think, in this one was the time sequence of when this event took place vis-a-vis the school day that was already unfolding for some of the different schools. So nonetheless, that's an important thing. I'd say the other thing is messaging, outreach, and what we do in the affected area. And in the aftermath of this incident, we heard from residents in the area on this same subject matter. In the future, I think it will be important that we have within our organization an employee at the level of battalion chief or deputy chief, if it's police or fire, to respond into the area and help assess the situation firsthand. Related to that, we've talked about the utilization of a community liaison officer, if you will, or employee who would go and be in the area to serve as a resource to residents in the impacted area, because I think we did have residents in the impacted area that felt like they were left alone. And so I think we recognize that that's important. We did discuss in the feedback session that we did consider at the time, deployment of the mobile police command station. But we had some concern, as I recall at the time, that we didn't want to draw people out of their homes, out into the water environment when the situation was first going on, and as well as having that command vehicle staging in the same area where the media was staging. And so what was the best thing to do? So we've thought through that process. Another thing that we heard and we recognized is an issue, our telephone system. Our telephone system can get overwhelmed, and it was overwhelmed during this event. In spring of 2026, we will be migrating to a new phone system, which, from an IT standpoint, tell me if I'm saying this wrong, Tomas, has virtually limitless capacity. I'm getting the head nod, so I said it right. So, so that residents should not, in such a circumstance, experience a busy signal. And so, communication certainly probably goes without saying, is certainly extremely important. From a recovery operations standpoint, I think the village did a great job at marshaling resources on the fly to do water distribution. But we give some more thought to the importance of, using our EOC jargon, the importance of the planning section and the logistics section to bring coordination to that and to organize those efforts. I will say we really sort of organized a lot of those things on the fly. There are a lot of different people involved in making that happen, including the village manager and various officials in the village that sort of made that happen. And obviously, folks that were involved in that or received the benefit of that know that, one of our distribution sites was Sketchbook. So on that subject matter, it's important for us, and we recognize that we need to go through and establish and review memorandums of understanding to establish, staging and distribution sites for these things, and conceptualize different events and what our needs may be, so that we're prepared or better prepared in the future to roll those out in as seamless a fashion as we can. And then, we've touched on, I think, the biggest thing from the Public Works response standpoint, which is, assessing the transmission infrastructure. And that's not to say that it will stop there, but the transmission infrastructure is, we consider to be, our pipe size is 20-inch and up, and that's 50,000 lineal feet of pipe. But as you can imagine, in terms of a consequence of failure, those are the pipes, the failures that really have a huge impact. I would note as well that we are in the process of reviewing it and continuing to develop our emergency response plan. And I would note one thing as well, and that is that there's been a change in protocol for a similar event in the future, and that is that Evanston will curtail the water supply for us in the future. And so that is a change. Related to that, I'll just throw out real quickly. We had our annual wholesale water customer meeting with Evanston a month or two ago, and Evanston will be resuming discussions with Wilmette to pursue an emergency water interconnection agreement. In the same vein, Skokie needs to think about and pursue that same subject matter with Wilmette, because it may be easy to conceptualize that we could have an event like this again, knock on wood, I hope we never do, or that Evanston could have some sort of other issue that would result in us losing access to the water supply there. And if that were the case, we don't have a backup source. So whether that's something with Chicago, I think that unlikely, or if that's with Wilmette, which I think is more likely, that's another outcome. With that, I will entertain any questions.
Thank you. I do have a question, not so much for Max, it maybe is for John. Talking about infrastructure, Dr. D mentioned the CIP. Can you talk, and infrastructure came up as a priority from residents in the strategic plan. So John, can you talk, please, just a little bit about the capital improvement project process and how that will relate to the ongoing next steps for this?
The village has a published 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP, for water and sewer, for buildings, for fleet, and for all of our significant capital items in the community. And so every year, there is a focus on identifying for water specifically. There's a focus on what streets are going to be resurfaced, and then we make sure that we have the underground infrastructure in the best condition in order to last the life of the new street. And so every year, we review our capital improvement program. We actually start that process either in November or December. This year, we're doing it the first week of December. But it's a routine process for the village to look out 10, 20 years and to make a 5-year CIP. And Max, you may have some more specifics that you want to elaborate.
No, I mean, I think you've covered it pretty well. I mean, for example, December 4th this year is our CIP meeting, and so, yeah, I think you've covered it.
Thank you. Trustee Kamani Levy.
I have a question about the life expectancy of the remaining assemblies within the village that were assembled around 1950. Is there a plan for that as well? Does this cover that?
Sure. I should, as I was listening to the presentation and thinking about people who deal with water daily and those of us that work in it, but not every day, and then those of us that are residents and just depend upon it when we need it. The infrastructure is elaborate. We have 150 miles of streets in town, and so all of those streets basically have underground infrastructure, water and sewer, some stormwater. And so the majority of the residential streets have closer to an 8-inch water main as opposed to this 36-inch transmission main. So we have two, Dr. D alluded to, there's two transmission mains coming from Evanston into Skokie where we get the majority of our water, around 90% of our water from those two transmission mains. And they happen to be northeast part of town and they're adjacent to each other running parallel. And so and we were talking about the 8-inch main where we thought there was a water break, the day before, and that is about 19 feet away from this big 36-inch transmission main. And so as we assess our system and we're replacing pipe, the majority of the system is more 8-inch main as opposed to the 36-inch main. But through the decades, there's been different materials that have been used in the pipes. And Max, you can elaborate on kind of the life expectancy of water main and.
Yeah, so, I mean, a general rule of thumb is life expectancy of the pipe material is expected to be 80 years to 100 years. There have been better and worse eras of pipe. Sometimes older pipe is better pipe than younger pipe that was thought to be better pipe, and it's not. That's the thing, right? When we talk about doing an assessment of the pipe based on wall thickness, that's good data in telling you what's happening with the pipe condition itself. I would say, looking at the three pipe sections that we pulled out in response to doing this investigation, as Sean said, it really was a joint and a fitting issue. The pipe condition was still really robust.
Okay, and a follow-up question, this might be for Dr. D, something that was alluded to earlier. The report didn't show any indications of any contaminants or anything with the water supply, and I assume that Skokie was pretty quick to shut off the water supply, so there shouldn't have been any issue, right?
Right, yeah.
It's probably a good opportunity to remind everybody about our lead testing, the testing of the water supply that we do on a regular basis. The health department is responsible for testing our water supply, and so on a regular basis, there's 40-plus locations in the community where we draw samples of the water and ensure that we are meeting standards in order for it to be safe drinking water. And we publish those reports on the village's website, and so the environmental health department also has a responsibility with the water and ensuring safety and coordinated approach between Public Works and the health department.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Trustee Schechter.
I just have a comment and a question. One comment, when you talked about, pardon me, the community coming together and the distribution. And, one thing from my perspective is that we missed out on, again, from my perspective, the homebound people, because a number of us, I helped to give out some water to seniors and people with disabilities who couldn't get to Sketchbook. So it might be good for, I don't know who would be in charge of that in the village, but to keep track of who are those people who are vulnerable.
Trustee Schechter, I think John has a follow-up on that.
I appreciate you surfacing the concept. And so our Health and Human Services Department was working directly with the restaurants during the February 14th event, but also working with the individuals in our community that we were aware, that they are aware needed an extra assist. And so we had employees every day, the 14th, 15th, and 16th, and into the next week, walking the immediate area where the water main break occurred or the failure occurred with the seal. And so we were distributing water bottles and knocking on doors, and at that point we were seeking to understand the damage that people had incurred, because we were working diligently to access federal dollars for emergency mitigation. And so we unfortunately did not. In a way, it was fortunate, and another way, it was unfortunate that we didn't reach the threshold for that emergency management funding. But we were in that neighborhood distributing water, the fire department and manager's office people, as well as some of the other departments. But in Health and Human Services, were focusing on people that they knew that needed throughout the community that may need an extra assist, and so they were working diligently as well.
Yeah. It may be a matter of just even getting more people on that list. But then thank you. And then my last question was about just when you were talking about like some of these logistics and, sort of lessons learned, and you talked about something like a battalion chief being present. And I think also there's some confusion when something like this happens. Is this Public Works comes out, or what's the role of the fire department? Just some of those, understanding the roles of the departments.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Chief Eschner wants to come up and talk about it or not, but I'll say this. I mean, typically, a lot of our EOC activities like this, it is not unusual for the public safety chiefs to step in and sort of head up the EOC. I don't know, you have something you want to say? Because we go into what's referred to as an incident command type of structure, and that is most, I'll call it natural to the police and the fire personnel. We're familiar with it. Many different departments in the village get trained in ICS structure, so we're familiar with the acronyms, and we practice it, and we do EOC drills where we do those things, but oftentimes the leadership is typically here has been fire chief, so.
Yeah. So real quick, thank you for the opportunity. Just to kind of expound upon that, a lot of times these EOC callouts are like either fire or police driven. And so with that being the case, traditionally you have a fire or police liaison on the scene right away. And so in this case, it was a little bit more public works driven, and so we didn't have that liaison right away. What we were doing at the fire department is we were figuring out how we were going to provide fire protection to the community without water. And so, that's what we were working on at the fire department. We were ordering tankers up, interdivisional Mavis box alarms, all these things that were going to get our fire department up and running. But taking a step back, when we had a time to catch our breath, there might have been some value to getting that liaison out there. So definitely a lesson learned, especially when it's not a police or fire-driven emergency, that, there may be some value getting both police and fire there a little bit sooner. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Just to elaborate a little bit more, to give a sense of what we mean by our Emergency Operations Center. So as we were collecting data in the 6 a.m. hour and getting into the 7 a.m., that's when we realized we had the issue. And so we made the decision to have an EOC at 7:30 a.m. on the 14th. And so we did that via Zoom, and there were approximately 18 of us on that call. And so we did shared incident command, fire chief, public works director, fire chief, and I talked between that 6:45 a.m. and 7:15 a.m. time period several times. And then we rolled out the EOC, and then over the weekend, that EOC group grew a bit, but we were meeting every 4 hours or so in order to better allocate our resources and be able to serve the community the best we could. And so just to give a little bit more flavor of how the EOC works, that was really a shared incident command structure for this one.
The EOC got a lot of practice during COVID. It was like an 18-month EOC. I mean, it really was.
Well said.
We were constantly collaborating, and when there's an incident like that, oftentimes different staff will just start doing different things. The village manager, the chief, the public works director will make assignments, and a lot of staff, there's a cross-disciplinary aspect to it as well. And Gail, that was, as I recall, that was when the list of vulnerable residents really took shape, was during the pandemic, because Health and Human Services staff, as I recall, John, they were calling vulnerable residents on at least a weekly basis throughout the pandemic. So, but you're right, we could expand that list. Mm-hmm. Trustee Robinson.
Yeah, I would just add that there wasn't a playbook for COVID. I mean, there's a framework for emergency operations, but it really was a time for the community to really come together. And I just want to commend the community who stood and cared for our neighbors. Mm-hmm. Staff was instrumental. Fire was on scene. Myself and other elected officials were at the site delivering water. So it really did take neighbors and the whole community to come together. And I just didn't want that to go unnoticed.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. And you'll recall, again, we've been talking about these dates, and that was Valentine's Day weekend, which to our restaurants is a significant revenue generator. And you'll recall some groups in the community came together to mobilize the community to make an extra effort to patronize the businesses in the weeks following. So again, you're right, it did bring the community together in really wonderful ways. Thank you for sharing the lessons learned. Appreciate that. Any other questions before we wrap up? Thank you, Dr. D. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Chief. The next item is the report of the village manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, trustees, and good evening, everyone. Item A is regarding the 2025 property tax levy. As Julian Prendy, our finance director, is approaching the podium, I'm going to give a little bit of context. In order to sustain village services, a property tax levy of $16.2 million is required. This $750,000 increase results in an average monthly impact of $1.78 for residences, $4.80 for commercial buildings, and $11.45, again monthly, for industrial structures. The village strives to provide high-quality services in a fiscally responsible manner. The village collected the same levy of property taxes annually for 35 years. This was the result of turning a 5-year pledge into a 35-year frozen levy. If the village were to have only maintained the same buying power, the levy would have increased from $15.4 million to $32.3 million. It is also noteworthy that the value of property in Skokie during the same 35 years increased from $1.1 billion to $3.2 billion. I'm going to switch to the property tax bill. Cook County is currently sending out tax bills. Many people in the community received it over the last few days. The village of a property tax bill consists of 5.41% of that tax bill. This is the lowest among our comparable communities. While the village remains committed to achieving efficiencies and cost savings with our operations and the municipal responsibilities, it cannot maintain our current service levels with the 39 positions that are frozen across all departments. And so with that, Julian, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I'll spend about 20 minutes or so discussing a little more in detail what John presented. And this is a first for a couple of reasons for a lot of us, so feel free to interrupt me with questions throughout, or we'll allot some time at the end to go through any questions. Just a little bit about the process of property taxes in Illinois, Cook County especially, a fairly complex system that involves taxing bodies, the village, park districts, libraries, school districts in particular, several departments at the county, and the Illinois Department of Revenue. Around this time, taxing bodies get together and discuss their budgetary needs and establish tax levies through ordinances. We'll discuss it tonight. We'll bring it back next meeting with an actual ordinance. And around the end of December, these ordinances are communicated to the county. Concurrently, actually even before this time, the county assessor works to assess properties throughout the region, throughout the county. Now's Township is our particular area. The entire region is about 1.9 million in properties and over 80 billion in assessed value. They do this process, and we'll talk a little more in detail, over 3 years. As the tax levies are determined from taxing bodies and as the assessed values are gathered by the county, state law requires that assessed value is about 33% or 1/3 of market value. Cook County by ordinance assesses residential properties at 10% and commercial and industrial at 25%. That's when the Illinois Department of Revenue steps in and corrects that assessment mismatch. They provide the equalizing factor, which once you multiply it by the assessed values, creates the tax base or the equalized assessed valuation, the EAV. So again, now the numerator is known in that formula, which is the levy amounts combined. The denominator is the EAV. Those two figures produce the tax rate, which is again managed by the Cook County clerk. Each taxing body gets its own rate. And then in property tax bills, what you see is the separate bodies that tax that property and a combined total rate. Property owners get their bills through the county treasurer. They pay. The county treasurer in turn disseminates the funds to the various taxing districts. It has been a busy couple of weeks for property taxes. The county released the 2025 assessment notices, which hit homes, I think, last week or perhaps the week before. And I think the end of last week, we just now started receiving 2024 tax bills, the second installment of the 2024 tax bills. So property tax is probably front and center in people's minds. Just a little bit about assessments. I mentioned that the county runs their actual assessment process every 3 years. We call that a reassessment year. You'll see in this little chart in 2022 and 2025, because it takes a while. They look at every single property, they look at market factors, they compare properties, and then they determine a market value and then an assessed value. 82 billion in assessed value for all of these 1.9 million properties. 2025 results that folks are just receiving in their homes, good increases over what would be the prior year, but actually the 2022 reassessment year. 20% increase in market value and corresponding assessed value for single-family homes. 26% increase for condominiums. On the commercial side, those increases are upwards in the 30% range. Now, I include that here to make a note that an increase in assessment is not an increase in property taxes. Again, as I talked about, the numerator, denominator of the rates, the property taxes are determined by the amounts levied, and the assessment only determine the spread of the property tax amongst the commercial, industrial, and residential properties. But it is something that could impact property taxes in the future. The residents of Cook County and the Village of Skokie should be aware that there are some relief measures that the county does offer. The number one option, the number one appeal measure should be the assessed value. Because 2025 assessments have just gone out, the county has opened that appeal for the assessment values through December 5th. Those assessment appeals can be submitted directly through the Cook County Assessor's webpage. The Niles Township Assessor, which is the local office that helps residents, is located just off of Lincoln and Main there, and their phone number is also listed in the village's website. They do help residents directly with appeals and with assessments. In addition to appealing the assessments, the county also offers some measures that reduce the property tax burden, and these are through the various exemptions. Most common is the homeowner exemption. Essentially, just because you live in your primary home, the county offers an exemption to that assessed value. It reduces the property tax by a little bit. I don't recall the exact number, but I know a high number of property owners do not take advantage of it. And
Julian, John and I met earlier in the summer with Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi, and the statistic that he quoted to us was that 27%, so nearly 30% of Niles Township homeowners, so that's not specific to Skokie because Niles Township encompasses more than Skokie, but 27% of Niles Township homeowners don't take advantage of the homeowner's exemption, excuse me. And so we'll be working with him, as you said. There's also, I believe, a 4-year look-back provision that if you have not, as I understand this, if you have not been taking advantage of it and you do apply, you can be credited for up to 4 years back. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Yeah.
That means 24 through tax year 2021. And
Right.
again, those appeals, they're considered certificate of error appeals.
Yes.
They can be done directly through the county's website right
Right.
now, or with the help of Niles Township Assessor. But that is a very high number.
Yeah.
Again, the homeowner exemption, you must apply the first year you get in the home or get the home in your name, but then it's automatic. It just renews year after year. So these are the properties changing hands that are getting missed. Again, an invaluable tool that folks should take advantage of. Another exemption is the senior exemption. You are eligible on the year that you turn 65, on that tax year that you turn 65. Also available to be included in the certificate of error for the current 2024 and past 3 years, for a total of 4-year look back. There's some additional exemptions for folks with disabilities that, again, those certificate of errors could apply, but more information available on the county's on the county assessor's website and the Niles Township Assessor's website. Since we're on the topic of assessments, this chart looks at specifically the village's tax base, the equalized assessed valuation for the village alone. As John alluded to, back in 1990, 1.1 billion in assessed values throughout the past 35 years. And I include 2024 here because the county just released that data. It became available this morning, so I was able to grab it and include it in this chart. 210% overall increase in the taxable base in the EAV since 1990. That's an average of 3.4 0.74, excuse me, on an annual basis. That gray line represents the annual EAV increases, and then the green dotted line is the trend, that 3.74 trend line. The pie chart at the bottom right of this slide represents the breakdown of our total EAV, a fairly robust commercial and industrial sector, both together close to 40%, which is very healthy. The majority of our tax base is residential, as it's very common across communities like Skokie. But altogether, over 26,000 properties, about 3,800 of them commercial, almost 500 in industrial, and the rest as residential. Spend just a few minutes to talk about the progression of the tax levy through time, what has happened since 1990. As John alluded to, in 1991, the board implemented a 5-year tax freeze to the 1990 level, and that tax freeze was on the actual amount levied, $15,456,695. It was reevaluated after that first year initial time, and it was extended. It was determined at the time that the village's finances could support an additional year. It has been reevaluated every year since in conjunction with our overall budgeting, and it has been sustained through the 2024 tax year, which marked the 35th consecutive year that we levied the same exact amount, that $15.4 million, as in 1990. That in and of itself is a feat worthy of celebration. I am not aware of any community, certainly in the Chicago region, but perhaps even in the state, that has been able to sustain a property tax freeze in amount, not rate, in amount, for that long of a period of time. However, it has not been without impact. Maintaining the frozen levy has really demanded some strict controls on expenses on our part, and when necessary, it has required that we look at alternative revenue sources. On the expenditure side, as John alluded to, 39 position of a hiring freeze was implemented through the Great Recession, a great tool that helped us save about $3.2 million on an annual basis. That at the time impacted about 10% of our workforce, and that freeze remains in place today. We also, looking back, have done some other measures like increasing employee health insurance cost from 12% to 15%. We merged departments and divisions where possible. Health and Human Services is a good example of this. In 2022, we issued the pension obligation bonds, which allowed us to save about $800,000 in annual pension increases, as well as achieve some immediate savings on the overall pension liability that we had incurred. We've looked at creative ways to fund existing operations. For example, we partnered with the Village of Lincolnwood to create a joint dispatch center. Lincolnwood now relies on our services for dispatch. We bill them on a monthly basis. This way, they actually offset a little bit of our fixed costs. It's a win-win. Consolidating positions throughout this past many years. In Public Works, for example, supervisory positions like superintendents were reduced from 4 to 2. Other administrative roles have been consolidated in the police department, and the police chief's office, and the manager's office. We've been able to reduce and combine duties to reduce positions, and then just overall efficiencies in our operations. Looking at our revenue sources, we've had to rely on other sources to fund operations throughout this time. Our philosophy through the years has been to push the burden on funding at least a little bit, if not most, of our services to visitors to our town. And the best examples I can give, well, the primary reason for that is that visitors to our town, or folks who work here, enjoy the amenities that Skokie provides, and through voluntary activities, they participate in funding a portion of village services. And the best example we can give is the sales tax. Sales taxes alone are 23% of our overall revenue. A quarter of that amount comes from sales at the mall. If we look back just this past year, over 90% of visitors at Old Orchard Mall, 90% of cell phone data that we can have available, show that folks are not from Skokie zip codes. They are from outside of Skokie zip codes, and it could be Chicago, Wilmette, anywhere. If I take the 90% figure and apply it to revenue, that's almost $8 million in annual funding that comes from outsiders visiting our town, just in sales taxes alone. The concept has worked great when it comes to pushing out some of our funding to outsiders and visitors to our town. But when we look at the sales taxes as a revenue source, it has not kept up with inflation through time. Leading up to 2020, right before the pandemic, sales taxes were not only stagnant, they were actually going down year after year by 2%. That trend that you see for EAV was opposite, was reversed for sales taxes, and we brought this up year after year during budgeting. Some of these revenue sources have not kept up with inflation. When we've had to look at implementing new sources, and that's been done typically to address acute issues that have been presented when we became aware, and that we were certain could not fund through existing revenue. Another example I can give is the utility tax, implemented in 2010, just as the state of Illinois decided that to fix their budget woes, they captured 50% of the income tax allocations to municipalities. I mentioned this before. Income taxes in the state pre-2010, about 10% of the total taxes were shared with municipalities through the local government distributive fund. In 2010, the state reduced that percentage from 10 to 5. That was over a $5 million hit to the village at the time we implemented the municipal utility tax to address that revenue shortage. But even through this course of time, as we've implemented revenue sources, we have still maintained some of the lowest service charges of our area comparables. Give an example of the refuse fee. At $9.25 per month, we are the lowest of the comparable communities we look at. And on top of that, our yard waste pickup and our leaf pickup is offered at a no additional charge. It's free to our residents. For vehicle stickers, we charge $40 a vehicle. Again, the lowest amongst the area communities that we look at. Our water rate, one of the lowest, if not the lowest again. So even through these additional revenue sources, we have still maintained fairly low, if not the lowest, service charges for our revenue sources. Much has happened, however, outside of the village finances. Since 1990, inflation, the value of the dollar, the buying power, has gone down. Inflation up by 109% altogether, or 2.2% on average annually. As we mentioned, the EAV up 210%. In the last 10 years alone, that equates to about 4.85% in annual average increases. As John alluded to, if we had just increased the tax levy to keep up with inflation year after year, the tax levy for 2025 would have to be just over $32 million, or a whooping 16.9 increase higher than 1990. That would have meant that through time, another $260 million would have had to be collected from Skokie property owners since 1990. And the average home today would be paying $469 more, the average business about $1,339. Since everyone else's tax levy has increased since 1990, or from 1990, while the villages has remained flat, in addition, since the EAV has also gone up, what we see through time is that the share that the village takes out of an average property tax bill has significantly gone down. In the tax year 1990, the 16% of an average tax bill came to the village. That meant funding operations and debt and capital and pensions. In 2023, that's tax year 2023, that percentage has dropped to 5.41%. What you'll note here is that every other district, with the exception of other there that combines district that no longer exists, every other district here has increased the tax share in the property tax bill. A natural progression as the village's share gets smaller, every other district takes a bigger chunk. It's also worthy of note that some of these districts are not home rule, whereas the village has the ability to raise revenue. Our school districts, for example, and some other districts are not home rule. They are limited in how much revenue they can increase. However, using the available tools in state law, most school districts year after year increase their tax levy by 5%, which is prescribed in law, in addition to any new property that may come online. So that's also created this larger chunk or the increase in the average grade school and high school and library, park district, and so on. What that means for the average residential tax bill, with the 2023 tax year, it's about $7,200 based on the median value. Skokie's share of that is just $390. Taking a step back and just looking at how we compare with some of the towns around us and some of the towns that are of our particular population size. There's a lot of data here, but let me just work through it quickly. The first three data columns next to the municipality's name are just raw data. We have the 2024 tax levy, the population for each town, and then total household income, and that data comes from the American Community Survey. The next three columns, the last three columns that are color-coded there, those are more metrics that we look at when we compare. The first one is the average share of the total tax bill, which we just mentioned. The second is the levy per capita, and then the last is the levy as a percent of household income. The color coding here goes from green to red, as in the lowest to highest. That's why it's kind of spread differently. Not every single measure follows the same highest to lowest ranking. But suffice to say that the Village of Skokie is the lowest in all of these three comparable categories. We are the lowest tax share at 5.1%, 5.41%. We levy the lowest per capita at $230, and we take the smallest chunk of a household's income at 0.44%. Also important to note, as we're talking about other fees, some of these, and again, not to pick up on our neighbors, but some of these towns that, take Glenview, for example, as the second lowest, their garbage fee is almost double what the village charges. Evanston, our neighbor to the east, that is the next lowest garbage, has a much higher property tax levy, almost 3 times the per capita amount. So all in all, I would say that the village remains the lowest, certainly when it comes to the property tax comparison metrics, but also while maintaining fairly low service charges on all other categories. And that brings us to our 2025 levy today. As I mentioned, the tax levy was evaluated year after year in light of the overall village budget. Property taxes are a critical funding source. Even though the amount is not large, 92% of that 15.5 million levy goes to fund debt service and pensions. Only a small portion of it is left for operation, about 1.2 million, which is 1.4% of the general fund. On the other hand, sales taxes, as I mentioned, are the largest single source revenue. And on top of sales taxes, we also rely heavily on other sources that combined make up 73% of economically sensitive sources. These include the sales taxes, the food and beverage taxes, building permit activity, and so on. A very high exposure and risk when it comes to economic downturns. We look to the property tax as one of the more stable and secure sources of revenue, and really a protection measure against those economic downturns. The timing of the tax levy system in Illinois and Cook County particularly is not helpful. We are discussing a 2025 levy now in November of 2025 that goes to fund our fiscal 2027. Again, the 2025 levy will hit tax bills in first installment in March, and then the second installment, if all goes well, in August, with funds collected around September, which is about middle of our fiscal 2027. So we are making this recommendation today to fund fiscal 2027 expenditures. As we approach fiscal 2027, we're already aware of unfunded expenditures that are new since last year's budget. I'll take these briefly in order. The structural deficit is something that you may have heard me bring up as we discuss the fiscal 2026 budget. That, in essence, is the growth pace of our expenditures has always been greater than the growth pace of our revenues. This is not a unique phenomenon to Skokie. This is not a unique phenomenon to fiscal 27 or 2026. It's just the nature of governmental services whereby costs increase close to or higher than inflation, whereas revenue does not necessarily always keep up with that pace, as we mentioned, the sales taxes. I'll give you a little more specific example. In order to just maintain the workforce on an annual basis, it costs us about $1.7 million. When we look at all of our available existing revenue sources, we can count on about $1.7 million in new monies year after year, just from current sources. On top of maintaining the workforce, we also have to consider pension increases, health insurance increases, and then any new initiatives that we come up with or service enhancement that we would discuss. which we estimate to be about $1 million. So from the get-go, we're $1 million deficit on an annual basis. That's what I mean when I say a structural deficit. Our work year after year as management has been to look at those expenses and keep them down as low as we can in order to maintain both service level but also the financial integrity. Now, one of the greatest tools we used through 2010 was the hiring freeze, 39 positions, $3.2 million in annual savings, and we have maintained that. That hiring freeze is now starting to pressure operations and service delivery to the point where we believe we'll have to selectively and strategically start to ease the freeze to allow for some hiring of additional personnel, both in public safety and non-public safety across departments. We anticipate that for fiscal '27 to be about $350,000 in unfunded expenditures. On top of that, we have 3 firefighter positions that we hired through a federal grant 2 years ago. That SAFER grant is set to expire at April 30th of 2026, so we start fiscal '27 with 3 firefighter positions that are 100% our responsibility to the tune of about $410,000. Altogether, about $750,000 in new identified expenses without a funding source. For that reason, we are requesting and recommending an increase in the tax levy to cover those fiscal '27 identified expenses in the amount of $750,000 for a total levy of $16,206,345. All in, the residential impact is believed to be just $21.34 for the entire year, broken down to $1.78 per month. On an annual basis, a commercial entity is looking at $57 and an industrial about $137. How do we use property taxes? As I mentioned, the great majority, 92%, goes to fund debt and pensions. In fiscal '26, at that $15.4 million total, you'll see $11.3 million goes to fund debt service and $2.9 goes to fund non-public safety pensions. That 11.3 figure also includes $10.5 million in debt service for the pension obligation bonds, which, as you may recall, were issued to fund public safety pensions and reduce the overall liability. The only change proposed for fiscal '27 is that an additional amount of $749,000, to be specific, will go towards operations and funding public services. I mentioned the debt portion of the tax levy, and this is an important point to make. As the village issues debt from time to time, and on the left side of this slide, you'll see the various debt series that we have issued through time. At each debt issue, an ordinance is filed with Cook County that directs the county to collect an amount in taxes sufficient to cover that particular year's debt service. So as of now, for tax year 2025, the county is directed to file, to collect $17,611,000 just to cover the debt service on these outstanding series. Because we are recommended a fixed amount levy at 16.2, the village board must take action to forego essentially a portion of this amount or abate. Otherwise, property owners would be on the hook for this amount. So the abatement amount is just shy of $5.1 million, $5,099,000, for a total debt levy of $12,512,557. Now, I mentioned 11.3 in the prior slide, and you'll see 12.5 here. The difference is this figure, $1.2 million debt levy, which is specific to the public library. By state law, libraries cannot issue debt directly. They have to flow through the municipality. Our financials include library debt. Our total tax levy has also included this debt for the public library for many years. Now, because they are a separate taxing body, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that is a separate line item on property tax bills. It is not part of the 16.2 million, but it is something that needs to be included in the action tonight. Speaking of the public library, as I mentioned, separate taxing body. They review their budget needs, they review their financials, and recommend a levy based on their needs. For the 2025 tax year, the operations levy is just over $13,092,965. including the 1.2 million that I mentioned in the prior slide, the total tax levy for the public library is $14,294,265. That is a 4% increase over the prior year. As far as actions required, in particular to the tax levy tonight, we're asking the board to consider both the levy and the abatement amounts and vote to direct the Corporation Council to prepare the necessary ordinances. At the next meeting, then, we will bring forth both of those ordinances for a final vote and adoption. And by December 30, both of those ordinances will have to be filed with the county to be included in next year's tax bills. And that'll stop and take any questions.
Thank you, Julian. First, appreciate the report. I would ask for a motion. We'll get the motion and second on the floor, and then we'll go into our discussion. Is there a motion to concur with staff's recommendation and authorize the Corporation Council to draft the tax levy ordinance? Moved by Trustee Gail Schechter, seconded by Trustee Lissa Levy. Okay, we have that motion and second on the floor. Questions for Julian or John? Trustee Pure Slovan.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation. I actually understood it and didn't get lost, so you did really well. All kidding aside, however, I do have a couple questions. The federal firefighters grant, which is expiring, is there any reason we can't be reapplying, or was it a one-time only and you cannot reapply for those positions?
There is no reason we can't reapply. As a matter of fact, we're doing our best to get that grant again. We have no indication that we are receiving it, however. We're operating with the assumption we are not getting it.
Okay,
But we're trying both the original source and alternate sources to be able to get those positions grant funded. I will say, trustee, at some point, the grant dollars that fund those firefighters will dry up. They are not intended to be perpetually
Long-term.
grant funded, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, there's 39 positions you said that are presently frozen.
Correct.
If we were to vote on this, how many of those positions would be reinstated if we unfroze the tax levy? Can you get a guesstimate?
So the estimate that's included in that figure is 3 positions. But I will say, we really don't know what 3 positions, or whether 3 positions are sufficient as we meet and discuss the fiscal '27 budget in more detail. As we really get the crux of it from the departments, we'll get a better idea. We estimate that it would not be less than 3 positions, knowing and discussing with departments where service levels are and how they're getting impacted by the freeze. So the number is based on an estimate of 3 unfrozen positions. That may or may not be the final number as we prepare the fiscal '27 budget.
And Julian, that's in addition to the 3 firefighters, correct?
That's correct. Yes, I'm sorry. That's
Okay.
in addition to the
Yes,
grant funded
okay.
positions.
Thanks for the clarification.
So that will come out of the budget discussions of where there are pinch points in service delivery
Correct.
and what our priorities are as established through the strategic plan.
Which obviously is still concerning, because then there's still 36 positions that are frozen.
That is correct.
Right.
So it's a very small Band-Aid.
It is.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Other questions? Trustee Robinson?
Is it safe to assume that this is just kind of flat based on kind of where we are now and not including the hundreds of residents who are moving into the hundreds of new units, condos, townhomes to the community?
That is
The
correct.
impact of that?
Yes, we don't yet have a number on what that EAV growth will be for the 2025 tax year with which this would apply. But I would say that whatever EAV increase we receive, that $22.34 figure gets smaller because it gets shared across a larger tax base.
Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. Trustee Levy and then Trustee Schechter. Trustee Lissa Levy.
I don't have a question. I mostly have a comment, which is that raising taxes is deeply unpopular, but also, in this case, extremely necessary. And I just want to be on record saying that this is going to be a very difficult and unpopular decision. But we clearly need to do it. We are relying on staff to do so much with so little. And I think that we need to be really cognizant of how dedicated they've been under such constraints, and that we as a community, if we expect services we need to be able to pay for those services.
Thank you. Trustee Schechter.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Trustee Levy. I totally agree. Also, in terms of a property tax, it's a much more progressive source of funding compared to some of these fees that might hit, they're a flat, as a flat amount of money, they impact lower income people more. So the property tax, as you said in your memo, it actually sort of blankets through the entire community. But I did have a question, sort of dovetailing on Trustee Robinson about, that we do have, we are going to get more new developments, but we have developments now like the Optima, High Point, and now the Henry is just about done, that these are people, so we're adding a lot of people who also are demanding services that, just to clarify, it's hard to keep a same kind of levy when we're increasing our population and number of units. Do you have even a sense of what that growth has, maybe that's for Mr. Lockerbie?
The growth of population?
Or even the number, because the growth of population, we might actually have more units than we have in terms of population because of smaller, but
we can take a look at the past X number of years and the number of dwelling units that have been added. It is a complex, when commercial property closes or offices close and they're converted to residential, there is a complete change in the assessed value. And so there's a number of variables at play as new residential units are added.
yeah, just to clarify what I meant, that because families are getting smaller, the growth in the number of units might be exponentially higher than the growth in the actual population, so.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the past few years and provide some data.
Other comments or questions for Julian or John? Okay, if not, we'll close the presentation for now. Is there anyone in the audience? We will take up to 5 comments. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Ms. Grodnicki and then Mr. Dalka.
So I had actually a bunch of thoughts. One is that I know a lot of people talk about paying a lawyer to challenge their property assessment. Is there a way, like the rich and financially savvy are able to do this, but the people who are not in that category don't have that advantage, and so their property taxes are going to go up higher proportionally than somebody who is able to do that. And then, also, is it possible to change the rate on rental properties versus, like owned properties? And then, maybe we can get creative. I'm not arguing against the property tax increase, I just want to say. Maybe we can get creative with trash volume, because a lot of other municipalities have different rates for different size trash bins, and that's actually a huge cost for a village. And then I'm just gonna say this out up front because I think it needs to be part of the conversation. Like, some of your opponents ran on saying, they're gonna raise our property taxes. You see, it would be 32 million property tax levy if we hadn't kept it frozen. But I think a lot of people don't understand what it means for the levy to go up. And so it's gonna be less than $2 on average per household per month. It's not gonna affect anybody's budget. But I think that it needs to be really, really clear in all of the messaging what the levy is versus individual property taxes, because people are going to see their bill skyrocket, and it's not because of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grodnicki. Mr. Dalka.
Good evening. Dave Dalka, representing 9330 Laurel. I just want to say that this vote and this tax raise is avoidable if we properly developed all the commercial properties within the village. If you go to the shopping center at Tui and Central, the part that is Skokie's currently has 9 vacant parcels in it, which is about half the parcels that are on the Skokie side. There are other places in Skokie that have vacant commercial buildings. There's two on Gulf Road, one at the intersection of Lockwood and Gulf that needs to be widened, as per my June 3rd letter, and one just on the other side next to the Jiffy Lube there. I'd like to ask that this vote be deferred until we can take an inventory of all those properties and develop a plan to get them back on the rolls and utilized. I think that's necessary. I think that's important. And that could lead to additional revenues. I wanted to address Gail's comment a minute ago. I agree with you that more residents need more services if we add more buildings like that. I've asked repeatedly, and I want to ask again right now, any large parcels of land in the village of Skokie, we need to reach out to Loyola, University of Chicago, U of I Health, Rush, and ask them and beg them to build additional healthcare facilities here, whether it's outpatient or a small hospital or a specialty something, anything that create competition with the monopoly that is Endeavor Health in this village would raise quality of life and would also raise, it wouldn't provide those extra services, but it would also, if you have a high quality medical facility, people come there. I mean, there's at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park, there's now a burgeoning group of hotels that have been built nearby for people to come there for high quality medical care. I think a world-class village needs world-class medical care. We don't have world-class medical care in Skokie with Endeavor Health. We have criminals who steal senior citizens' money with false bills. I filed police reports about this and nothing's been done. So the last part of my comments are about the fact that, the opportunity costs of this, not having commercial properties on the tax rolls at full value, is that we have to have conversations like this, unfortunately. I think it's avoidable. I urge Gail to meet with me and others to talk about those ideas. Lastly, I just need to vent about an item of expense that goes with this. We used to have 2 full-time animal inspectors in this city. One was named Maggie. Many of you know her. She was a wonderful person who provided full-service animal control to my parents for decades. She retired, and they have now been replaced by front desk clerks at the police station who rarely go out and do the job they're assigned to. We continue to file police complaints about 9334 Laurel, and nothing happens. There's an opportunity cost to, the allocation choices we make, and I hope that the village restores animal control properly soon.
Thank you, Mr. Dalka. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Okay. Oh, yes, please, come to the podium. If you kindly just give us your name.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ademilola Kayode. I'm a business owner in Skokie, and I'm also a resident. I've been living in Skokie for the past over 10 years now, and I like it here. I have a question. It may not be anything to do with the tax or what's already on ground. My restaurant is on Main Street, and I realized that there's no public transportation on Main Street, and it's a concern for me. I don't know who to talk to about it.
Sure. So thank you for raising that. Right now, we are talking about the tax levy. We will have a time
No, I don't
later
have a
for
problem
public
with
comment.
the-
But if you would kindly, I believe we're hearing a case about your restaurant in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So we have your contact information. Someone from staff will contact you about the issue of public transit. Thank you for coming to the podium and raising that, and thank you for investing in Skokie. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lisalivi?
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan?
What are we voting on? I'm lost here. Is it on the no, this was only first.
So it's, it's to concur with the recommendations of staff.
To draw the
To draft
ordinance.
the- draw the
So we can
ordinance.
continue the conversation.
It'll
on
come
this.
back on the next
Yes,
agenda.
Thank you. Then aye. Thank you for the clarification.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. I'd like to commend, before we move on, staff, I'd like to commend this board for considering this difficult subject. I share the, the sense of my colleagues that this brings none of us joy, other than knowing that we will be able to continue providing services and that it is a regressive tax based, I'm sorry, it's a progressive tax, I misspoke, based on ownership rather than a regressive tax. We did at our retreat talk about different types of revenues, including some that were regressive, and we, again, as a board, rejected that. We're not interested in doing and in passing fees that impact residents with lower income at a disproportionate level. So, again, thank you for the good work, as always, and to staff. Okay, John?
So items B, C, D, and E were approved as part of tonight's consent agenda. Item F is regarding a request for closed session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C1 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act. A closed session is requested and to adjourn therefrom.
Will someone make that motion, please? Trustee Lissa Levy, is there a second? Trustee Piers Slovan. Any questions or discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pure-Slovan?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
The motion passes.
And that completes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next item on the agenda is the report of our Corporation Counsel, Barbara Mangler.
Good evening, everyone. I have one item on my report, which was previously adopted with tonight's consent agenda. So that completes my report.
Thank you, Barbara. And just to give another shout out to what that was, it's a new 5-story mixed-use building in the 8200 block of Skokie Boulevard that is in one of our transit corridors, and the developer voluntarily doubled the amount of affordable housing at a 60% AMI level, which we're all pleased about, and the community seemed pleased too. So, thank you, Barb. Next item on the agenda for new business is a resolution, and I'm going to go to it now. A resolution approving and authorizing the Village of Skokie's landmark statement recognizing the ancestral homeland for Native peoples. Before I read the statement, what I'd like to just point out is this work, first of all, it was requested by the community, as was the village's recent examination of the village seal. And that work, as you know, was not done in a vacuum. We put together a community committee that included members of the indigenous peoples. And so their voices and guidance were reflected in the process that led to our new seal. In the same vein, as part of our ongoing commitment to honoring Native peoples who were the original inhabitants of this land in and around Skokie, the village, we are so fortunate to have an individual who lives in our community, Ms. Jasmine Gourneau. Jasmine is the Director of Native American and Indigenous Affairs at Northwestern, and she is of the Oneida Nation citizen and Menominee descendant. She actually worked with our staff, with Alex Franz. Alex is here tonight. Thank you, Alex, to develop this land acknowledgement. And this is not going to be something that we will, as proposed, we won't be reading it at every meeting. There won't even be a plaque in these chambers. What was decided by Jasmine and the Native community was what they were interested in was deciding on the language, and there will be an area of green space. I believe it's going to be, Alex, it's going to be right out here in sort of the courtyard, right outside the front steps. That will be a green space that will be converted into a native garden. It will feature plants that are indigenous to the area, and it will be dedicated to the native community, and there will be a plaque, inscribed land acknowledgement in this garden. So I'm very, very pleased with what we're presenting tonight. So I will read the statement, the land acknowledgement. Barb, do I need to read the resolution?
You can, or you can just read what's.
Okay, I'm not going to read the entire resolution. It's in the packet, it's online. I will, though, read the land acknowledgement. The Village of Skokie acknowledges that the land that it occupies today is the unceded ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Adawa, and the Potawatomi nations. More than a dozen other nations called this area home, including the Ho-Chunk, Kickapoo, Menominee, Miami, Sac and Fox, and Illini Confederacy, meaning Peoria, Piankashaw, Wea, and Kaskaskia. Despite the forced removal, displacement, and oppression of the original inhabitants of this land, indigenous communities continue to live, work, and thrive in the Village of Skokie and Chicagoland area. We recognize their enduring presence, resilience, and ongoing relationship to this land, and commit to learning and promoting a greater understanding on the indigenous peoples who stewarded and continue to steward the lands that the village occupies, and to strive to cultivate a diverse, equitable, and inclusive society for all. May our acknowledgement affirm our commitment to dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism from which we benefit, and inspire education, reflection, and meaningful action today and for generations to come. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Trustee Robinson.
I think since we're honoring these lands, this is the first in many years that I've only heard a portion of a resolution. So because we want to honor the people, I think it's fair to read the entire
Sure.
resolution.
Would you like to read it?
I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Whereas, in March 2025, the Village Board approved a new village seal, who designed, honors the history of Skokie's land, Native communities from the region, the promise of Skokie's future, and the richness of Skokie's multicultural community. And whereas the Chicagoland area is the homeland of the Council of Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi nations, for more than a dozen of other nations, have the Chicagoland area as their homeland, as well as including the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Miami, Sac, and Fox nations. Whereas the Village of Skokie recognizes that the land that it occupies today is the unceded ancestral homeland of the Native people, and whereas November is National Native American Heritage Month, and this is the time that we celebrate the many contributions, achievements, traditions, and stories of Native American communities, and whereas the village acknowledges that these nations were stewards of this land, water, and ecosystems, maintaining vibrant communities, traditions, and cultural practices that continue to this day. And whereas a land acknowledgement is a formal statement to recognize the enduring relationship between indigenous people and lands taken from them to serve to illuminate the ongoing indigenous presence and to show respect and honor to the indigenous people. From the land of the United States has become home since the time of immemorial, and whereas the Village of Skokie honors the enduring presence, resilience, and contributions of indigenous people, including members of these nations who live in and around Skokie today, and whereas as a part of the village's ongoing commitment to honoring the Native peoples, the village will plant a native garden in an area of green space by Village Hall, which will include the village's land acknowledgement statement. Now therefore it be resolved by the mayor and board of trustees, the village of Skokie, Cook County, state of Illinois, hereby approve and authorize the following as the village of Skokie's land acknowledgement statement that you read. Passed on this 17th day of November 2025.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Just point of clarification, appreciate you reading it. I'm told that we don't usually read resolutions, it's the proclamations that we read. So, but thank you for getting that on the record. Any other comments, Trustee Schechter? And then I'll call for a,
Thank you.
we'll see if
Actually, it was
community.
great to hear. It
Yes.
was great to hear the whole thing.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you. And
Yes.
it's wonderful that the village is doing this, probably well overdue, but hey, it's never too late. I just wanted to suggest as well, the organization, so I'm an executive director of a nonprofit called Housing Opportunities and Maintenance for the Elderly, and we also worked with Jasmine Gourneau on our land acknowledgement statement, and our board really felt that it was important to have a sort of a part two, like have the statement, but also some concrete things that we committed to doing, you know, over like the coming year. So I would just suggest maybe thinking about, you know, the village doing this, like putting, maybe it goes to the Human Relations Commission, but some legs on the statement, like, just to give you a couple of examples of what we did, you know, just cultural sensitivity trainings, making sure people understand and learn the history of tribes, implementing indigenous practices into our practices in a way that avoids cultural appropriation, supporting local indigenous communities in efforts that they're doing. I mean, this is just a few examples.
Thank you. That's something we can certainly consider asking one of our commissions to take up in 2026. Other comments? Any comments from the public? Okay, if not, is there a motion to concur with the resolution approving and authorizing the Village of Skokie's landmark statement recognizing the ancestral homeland of Native peoples? Is there a motion to concur? Trustee Kamani Levy, second by Trustee Pierce Slovan. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lisa-Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Slovan?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
And the motion passes. Next item is the Plan Commission. And this is Plan Commission Case 2025-15P, a special use permit for 3358 Main Street, presented by Chairperson Paul Luke.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. At the October 16th meeting of the Plan Commission, we reviewed a request from Miss Coyote, owner and operator of Mrs. K's Kitchen, for a special use permit to expand her existing carryout and catering restaurant for a limited service restaurant seating at 3358 Main Street in a B1 service commercial zoning district. The proposed change includes adding 5 tables with seating for 16 people in a current reception area. No changes to the kitchen or service areas are proposed. Several recent site improvements have been completed. The parking lot has been sealed and coated and restriped, and a new trash enclosure has been installed in accordance with village standards for food service establishments. No interested parties came forward to speak at the meeting. The Appearance Commission approval was not necessary, and the Plan Commission voted 8 ayes and 1 member absent to approve the request.
Thank you, Chairperson Luke. Is there a motion to concur with Plan Commission recommendation 2025-15P, special use permit for 3358 Main Street? I'm sorry. Trustee Lissa Levy enthusiastically makes that motion, and trustee Kamani Levy makes it an equally enthusiastic second. I'm going to start off the discussion. Ms. Kayode, I remember after we were first sworn in, you were one of the first people to come into the office to talk about your plans for your restaurant. Thank you for investing. I know you started in our downtown, and then you
Yes.
moved to Main Street. We appreciate your investment in Skokie, and it really pleases me to have this come before the board tonight, especially on such a strong recommendation from our Plan Commission. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or discussion from the board? Trustee Iverson, you look like you're ready.
Well, just actually, the madam's question about public transportation.
John will follow up with her. Yes, that's
Thank
been
you.
addressed. Thank you. Okay, no other questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovan?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kamani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye, good luck.
And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your investment in Skokie.
Older sister, I came in from Canada.
Oh, thank you for supporting your sister. Thank you, you too.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chairperson Luke. The last item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone who has not yet addressed the board this evening who wishes to do so? If you would, please go to the podium and you will be given 3 minutes. Okay, there being no one, apparently, trustee Kamani Levy.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Over the past few months, I've had the chance to see our village operations up close and personal. I took a page from Trustee Lissa's book, and I did ride-alongs with the police department, the fire department, and Public Works. Shout out to them. It was amazing experience. I also joined about 20, 25-ish toddlers for the Civic Explorers program. Another shout out to Alex Franz. It was an amazing experience, and it really touched my heart. It gave me the chance to see how dedicated the staff and the employees are here, and all the resources that are being used and worked. Everything's being worked quietly behind the scenes. So I just really wanted to give the village a shout out, and to another one of Trustee Lissa Levy's points, like, they work really hard with so little, and they really try their hardest to provide for us, for village residents. A second point I wanted to make, I wanted to acknowledge our last board meeting. I felt like it was the most collaborative discussion we've had, and I just really wanted to thank everyone on the dais for what we did for our village residents. It was a scary topic for me to discuss. Again, I'm a former immigrant. I'm walking around with my passport in my car because I was afraid I was going to get picked up. But I really, really appreciate everyone for the healthy discussion that went on during the last village meeting. So thank you.
Thank you,
all.
Trustee Levy. I have Trustee Iverson, go ahead.
Just a very quick
Sure.
2 cents to add to what Trustee Levy and Levy have been saying.
The trustees Levy.
Is that, of course, we're having an important revenue discussion, going on right now. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback from people. Getting more feedback is always very valuable. But what the trustees have been talking about is, for me, directly related to the actual value of our community, which is great. We have a lot of very, very important assets that make life very good in our community, and that we have to make sure that they're conservatively, fiscally strong.
Thank you. I have a few closing remarks. I'll be brief. I do want to mention, there was a speaker earlier this evening who talked at length for her 3 minutes about public safety. I want to just, for the record, laud the Human Relations Commission. The subcommittee met last week. Trustees Pure Slovan and Schechter were in the room. There was extensive discussion on next steps towards healing our community and moving forward after the hate crime that occurred in Skokie on October 7th. Along that same lines, John and I met today along with our police chief, Jesse Barnes, with representatives from the Skokie Park District, to talk about how the organizations who are, have a strong collaborative relationship already, how we can continue to work together to strengthen and increase the sense of safety in our community. So those conversations continue. Thanksgiving is next week. The Niles Township Clergy Forum is hosting their annual Interfaith Thanksgiving service. It will be on Tuesday, November 25th at 7:30 p.m. at Central United Methodist Church, which is at 8237 Kenton Avenue in Skokie. This will be, I've lost count, but I think it's probably the 55th or 56th year, maybe even more than that, maybe 57th, 58th, that this service has taken place. So if you've not attended, I would encourage you to do so. It usually lasts about an hour and a half. I would like to, in closing, express some gratitude to everyone who contributes to making Skokie a wonderful and caring community. Fellow electeds, as was just said, for thoughtful, dedicated service. Village staff, for the hard work that they perform day in and day out. To the members of our volunteer boards and commissions. Again, we had more folks join those ranks this evening. To residents, for making Skokie stronger, for their input, for their compassion, for their community pride, and for caring for their neighbors. To our partners, faith leaders, schools, Park District, library, Skokie Hospital, nonprofits, we can't do it alone. We depend on those community organizations. And certainly, last but not least, to our businesses for investing. So we have a lot to be grateful for in Skokie as we enter this season of Thanksgiving. So with all of that said, I would entertain a motion. It's not a motion to adjourn. It's a motion to move to closed session where we will adjourn therefrom. Is there a motion by Trustee Kamani Levy and a second by Trustee Lissa Levy? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Iverson?
Aye.
Trustee Lissa Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovin?
Aye.
Trustee Schechter?
Aye.
Trustee Kamani Levy?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Thank you. We will adjourn to closed session. We will move to closed session and adjourn therefrom.